"I can't believe you're asking me to do this," Maria whispered, her voice trembling as she stood in front of the lavish desk. The room, dimly lit by the glow of expensive chandeliers, felt cold, distant, just like the man behind the desk. "You have no choice," Mr. Donovan replied, his tone calculated and firm, his eyes piercing through the silence that stretched between them. "The money I'm offering you will change your life. But there's something else, something more important." Maria swallowed, heart racing. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, as if they carried a consequence she couldn't yet comprehend. "What is it you need me to do?" she asked, the uncertainty in her voice betraying her bravado. He leaned back, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're going to seduce my son." Mr. Donovan had built his empire on a foundation of control. A ruthless businessman, he had a mind like a chess player, always thinking 2 steps ahead, always manipulating the pieces of his life to maintain power. Yet, as successful as he was in the boardroom, there was a part of his world that remained beyond his reach. His son, Julian. Julian Donovan, the heir to the family fortune, had always been the subject of his father's scrutiny. From a young age, Julian had displayed signs that his interests didn't align with what Mr. Donovan had envisioned for him. It wasn't just his aloofness at social events, or his preference for spending time alone. It was the way Julian's eyes lingered on certain men at those events, the way his body language shifted when he was in their presence. His father had caught glimpses of this over the years, but every time he'd dismissed it. After all, Julian was a young man still, figuring himself out, right? But lately, Mr. Donovan couldn't shake the growing suspicion that something deeper was at play. The subtle hints, the way Julian had become distant, and even the whispers he'd heard in the corridors of their mansion, rumors about Julian's supposed relationships with men, things he didn't want to believe, but couldn't ignore. It wasn't that Mr. Donovan hated his son. No, far from it. Julian was intelligent, charming, and undoubtedly capable of taking over the family business when the time came. But there was an issue, a glaring issue, that Mr. Donovan couldn't overlook: Julian's sexuality. It wasn't just that Mr. Donovan didn't accept it, it was that he couldn't accept it. The idea of Julian, the heir to the Donovan name, falling in love with another man was a betrayal in his eyes, a threat to everything he had worked for, to the legacy he had carefully crafted over decades. Mr. Donovan had spent countless nights alone in his study, obsessing over his son's future. The idea of his business empire being run by someone who didn't fit the mold he had envisioned for a successor gnawed at him. If Julian's sexual orientation was indeed what he suspected, it would tarnish the public image, the pristine facade Mr. Donovan had cultivated with such effort. He needed control, not just of his company, but of his son's life. And so, his plan had been set into motion. Maria had been working for the Donovan family for nearly 7 years. She had entered the mansion as a young woman, fresh from her small village, hopeful for a better life. She had always been quiet, reserved, but her work ethic was unmatched. She started as a housekeeper, cleaning rooms, managing the laundry, and tending to the garden. Over time, her dedication to perfection and the subtle warmth she brought to the cold, sterile halls of the Donovan estate had earned her more responsibilities. She became not just a maid, but a trusted confidant, often privy to the private affairs of the family. Despite her growing role in their lives, Maria never felt like she truly belonged. She was always reminded of her place, the lower class. She often overheard conversations between Mr. Donovan and his business associate talks of billion-dollar deals, mergers, and power plays, but those were not for someone like her. Her struggles were a constant undercurrent in her life. Maria had dreams of her own dreams, of opening a small business, maybe a boutique, something to call her own, but those dreams felt far away. Every time she was reminded of her position in the Donovan household, the weight of it pressed her back into the shadows of their world. She could only watch as the family lived their opulent lives, their problems and triumphs so distant from the reality she knew. Despite the emotional toll of her role, she had never thought of leaving. The pay was generous, and her employers treated her better than many others in similar positions. But that didn't mean she wasn't trapped. She had little power over her circumstances, no voice in the household. And there were times, like tonight, when she felt as if the walls were closing in, leaving her with no choice but to comply. Maria's life had never been one of luxury, and perhaps that's what had made her more susceptible to Mr. Donovan's offer. She knew this could change everything for her. The money he promised would pay off debts, set up a future for her family, and maybe, just maybe, give her the freedom to start a new life. But at what cost? She'd heard the whispers about Julian. She'd seen how his father was distant with him, how the older man's gaze often lingered on his son with an intensity that wasn't fatherly. It wasn't until recently that Maria had understood why. Julian wasn't just distant because he was rebellious or misunderstood. He was distant because he was hiding a part of himself, a part of him that Mr. Donovan couldn't accept. Now, Maria was being asked to get closer to that part of Julian's life. Mr. Donovan had made it clear if she could seduce his son, perhaps she could change him, force him into the mold his father so desperately needed him to fit. Maria had never thought of Julian in that way. He had always been kind to her, often making small talk when their paths crossed. She saw the pain in his eyes, the same loneliness she sometimes felt, but she never imagined becoming part of the game his father was playing. She could tell there was more to Julian's story, something he wasn't ready to share, but that didn't matter to Mr. Donovan. His request was clear, and her mind raced as she thought about the consequences of either accepting or refusing it. Maria felt the words slam into her chest, a suffocating weight that left her momentarily breathless. She had expected a proposal, perhaps an agreement on terms, but this was something else entirely. Her eyes widened, and her heart raced as a cold shiver crept down her spine. I don't understand," Maria stammered, struggling to find her voice. "Why me?" Mr. Donovan's eyes never left hers as he straightened in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him, his posture exuding control. "You are the perfect person for this. You're close to him. His comfort, his trust, his need for affection. He won't see it coming." Maria recoiled slightly. She had always maintained a professional distance, careful not to overstep, to remain invisible. Julian had always been respectful to her, but she never imagined that the quiet glances and brief exchanges they shared could be seen as an opportunity for something far more sinister. "But he's your son," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking the words aloud made them more real. "Why would you want this?" Mr. Donovan's smile remained cold. "Because Julian refuses to become what I need him to be. He's a liability. His preferences will ruin everything I've built. He's too weak to understand the bigger picture, but he can be shaped. I need him to see the world as I do, and you, Maria, can make him see that. He won't resist you." The room grew tense as Maria tried to process what was being asked of her. She had seen the cracks in the surface of the Donovan family before, glimpsed the dysfunction that lay hidden beneath their polished exterior. But this was a betrayal of everything she had ever known. "You want me to change him?" Maria said slowly, the disbelief in her voice growing stronger. "You want me to make him something he's not?" "Precisely," Mr. Donovan replied, his tone unwavering. "Julian is a disappointment to me, and I'm not going to sit back and let him ruin the legacy I've built. This is the only way to ensure he falls in line. Maria felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she swallowed it down. The practical side of her mind reminding her of the life she had built around this job, the debt she carried, the promises she had made. The thought of leaving, of walking away from all of this, felt impossible. "And if I refuse?" Maria asked, her voice now steady, though her insides churned with fear. Mr. Donovan's expression shifted, but his smile didn't falter. "Refusal isn't an option, Maria. Not if you value your future here. You'll do this, or you'll leave without a penny to your name. Consider this your one chance at a new life, a life beyond cleaning floors and washing dishes." Maria's mind raced. The offer was tempting, the life it promised so different from her current reality. But the thought of betraying Julian, of manipulating him to satisfy his father's twisted sense of control, made her stomach turn. "I'm just a maid," Maria whispered, feeling the weight of her own insignificance. "Why would you think I could do something like that?" "Because you're smart," Mr. Donovan replied, his voice cold and sure. "And you're discreet. You've worked for me long enough to understand the importance of loyalty, even when it's hard. And right now, this is the hardest thing I'll ever ask of you. But it's also the only way forward." Maria stood there, frozen, as his words sank in. There was no easy way out of this. Either she played her part, manipulated Julian into becoming someone he wasn't, or she walked away from everything she had worked for. No money, no safety, nothing. Mr. Donovan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, and slid a sleek envelope across the table towards Maria. "Here's the first half," he said, his voice smooth and calculating. Maria hesitated, glancing at the envelope with disbelief. It was thick, heavy with the promise of something she had never seen before. "I'll pay you the rest once the job is done," Donovan added, his eyes unwavering. "This is your future, Maria. All of it. You'll never need to worry about anything again." Maria opened the envelope. Inside were crisp bills enough to cover her debts, her family's needs, and more. It was a sum that made her heart skip, a fortune that would set her free. But at what cost? She swallowed hard, looking up at Mr. Donovan. His gaze was intense, waiting for her answer. "I'll do it," she whispered, almost choking on the words. Mr. Donovan gave a small nod, his smile returning. "Good. Then we begin." The weight of her decision settled over her like a thick fog, but there was no turning back now. As the days passed, Maria began to change in subtle ways. She made sure to wear clothes that accentuated her figure, dresses that clung just enough to draw attention without revealing too much. She lingered a little longer than necessary after serving breakfast to Julian, ensuring her movements caught his eye. She made herself visible, always within his line of sight, but never too obvious. She studied his every reaction carefully, noting the way his gaze followed her across the room. It was as if she could feel the pull of his unspoken desires, even if he didn't fully understand them yet. The plan was in motion, and Maria was determined to succeed no matter the cost. It was an ordinary evening, and Julian had just returned to his room after a long day. He was tired, his mind clouded with the pressures of his father's expectations, but when he opened the door, he froze. There, standing at the threshold, was Maria. She was holding a laundry basket in one hand, the other hand brushing her dark hair behind her ear. She looked slightly flustered, as though she hadn't expected him to be there. "I was just coming to pick up your laundry," Maria said, her voice soft and almost breathless, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Julian nodded, still standing by the door, unsure of how to respond. "Thanks," he muttered, stepping aside to let her in. He couldn't quite place it, but there was something different about her tonight. Maybe it was the way she was dressed, a figure-hugging blouse that clung to her curves, paired with a skirt that seemed a bit too short for his memory. Or maybe it was the subtle scent of jasmine that lingered in the air, intoxicating and familiar. Maria moved past him, her body brushing against his as she made her way toward the laundry basket. Her movements were deliberate, slow, almost as if she wanted him to notice. When she bent down to pick up the clothes, she did so with an exaggerated grace, her back arched in a way that made her hips sway gently. The position wasn't accidental. She knew exactly what she was doing. As she straightened up, she let her hand linger on his arm for just a moment longer than necessary, her fingers lightly grazing his skin. Julian froze at the touch, his breath catching in his throat. He tried to ignore the rising heat in his chest, the way his body was reacting to her presence in a way he couldn't understand. Maria straightened up and smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. She leaned a little closer, her breath warm against his neck as she whispered, "Is there anything else I can do for you, Julian?" The words were low, almost a murmur, and her proximity made it impossible for him to focus on anything else. His heart raced, and he took a step back, his mind struggling to make sense of it all. He had never seen Maria like this. She was always so professional, so distant. Yet now, there was something in her eyes that made him feel confused, drawn to her in a way that made him question everything he knew about himself. But he couldn't deny the feeling that was slowly creeping up on him. Maria was testing his limits, and she knew it. With every subtle touch, every lingering glance, she was pushing him further into uncharted territory, making him feel things he didn't fully understand but couldn't push away. The tension between them was palpable, a quiet electricity that hummed in the air. Maria could feel Julian's hesitation, the conflict in his eyes as he tried to make sense of what was happening. She took a step back, allowing the space between them to grow for a brief moment, but only long enough for him to think. But it wasn't just physical attraction anymore. It was something more. Maria could see the confusion in Julian's expression, the way his hands clenched at his sides as if he wanted to resist but couldn't. She saw the subtle signs of his internal struggle, his body reacting to her in ways he had no control over. With careful precision, Maria moved closer once again, this time taking his hand in hers. The touch was light at first, but when she looked into his eyes, something shifted. His breath hitched as he looked down at their joined hands, his chest rising and falling quickly. She could see it, the way his resolve was beginning to crack. "Julian," she whispered, her voice soft but sure. "It's okay. You don't have to fight it." He stared at her, his lips parted, his mind spinning. Every part of him told him to step back, to pull away. But Maria's presence, the warmth of her body so close, was intoxicating. She wasn't just a maid anymore, Ish was something else entirely, something forbidden and irresistible. She reached up, her fingers gently caressing his jawline, her touch light but firm enough to draw his gaze back to her face. Her eyes were dark with intent, her lips slightly parted as if inviting him in. "Maria," Julian's voice trembled, the weight of his father's expectations still hanging over him like a cloud, but it was fading fast, replaced by something far more pressing. Before he could think any longer, Maria leaned in, her lips brushing against his. It was hesitant at first, an uncertain, soft press. But Julian's reaction was immediate. His hand moved to her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was desire, raw and unfiltered. His heart pounded in his chest as he lost himself in the heat of the moment. Maria responded in kind, her hands roaming to his shoulders, then down his chest, feeling the heat of his skin through the fabric of his shirt. Every touch, every movement was deliberate, designed to unravel the tension that had been building between them. She could feel him giving in, his resistance fading with every breath they shared. His hands moved to her back, pulling her in even closer, as if he could never get close enough. His lips found hers again, more urgent now, as if he had waited for this moment longer than he was willing to admit. The kiss grew more passionate, his body pressing against hers, and Maria let him lead, guiding him with the touch of her hands, her lips, her entire presence. For a moment, nothing existed outside of this room. It was just the two of them caught in a tangled web of longing, confusion, and something darker, something neither of them fully understood. But it wasn't just a kiss anymore. His hand slid lower, his touch more confident now as he explored her body, testing the boundaries of what he thought he knew. Maria, too, was moving with purpose, guiding his hands to where she wanted them, encouraging him to push further into the forbidden. Maria had done what she came for. She had crossed the line, and now Julian was no longer just the heir to the Donovan fortune. He was a man lost in the moment, lost in her, with no way of turning back. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, just a fleeting mistake, a deal made in the heat of the moment, but it had continued, lingering between them like an unspoken promise neither could escape. Maria hadn't expected to feel anything, but every time Julian looked at her, his presence ignited something deep inside her, a spark she tried to ignore, but couldn't. She wasn't sure if it was guilt or desire that kept her on edge. One afternoon, when the house was empty, Julian returned early. His unexpected presence startled Maria, who was in the kitchen. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the weight of their past actions hung between them. "Maria," Julian's voice was soft but filled with uncertainty. Maria paused, unsure of how to respond. "Julian, you're home early." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward her, his gaze intense. "Can we talk?" The air between them thickened as he spoke. "I've been thinking about us," he started, pacing slightly, his voice strained. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but now, I don't know what to feel. Maria's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the path she thought they'd take. "Julian, this can't go any further. You're my employer's son. We have to be careful." He stepped closer. "But it already has," he whispered, desperation in his eyes. "I can't forget it, Maria. I can't ignore how I feel." She looked away, struggling to keep her emotions in check. "I don't want to hurt you, but I don't know how to stop this either." The words hung heavy between them. No easy solution, no clear path forward. Just the weight of their feelings, tangled in a way neither could undo.